Cultural proficiency is really the use of our students' culture and their background and their race and their ethnicity as an asset, not as a deficit. And that really plays into equitable practices, because when you are culturally proficient and you understand the students that you serve, you're utilizing equitable practices to meet their needs. And the county has these marvelous resources that were on the table back there, and I think everyone picked them up, but this is online. And it goes through, and Rashida's going to share some specifics, but it goes through by number. And just as an example, it's not one of the ones we're going to go over, but if you look at the table of contents, which is on the back of the cover page, it gives you 27 equitable practices. And when you flip to each of those equitable practices, it tells you what they look like and how you can embed them in your instruction. And there are also short take videos on the MCPS website that show you the equitable practices and what they look like. Hey, Sherry, there's resources on the back table. I started a minute early to maximize our time.
Thank you.
So, Rashida, can I just touch your board to change it? No, I can't. So, we're going to watch a short take video that really just kind of gives an introduction of equitable practices. But as Rashida and I watched it, and we watched quite a few short takes and found them extremely valuable, we took three really strong main ideas away from them. And the first one is teaching expectations affect student achievement. If you tell your students the expectations, especially as they get older, if I know the expectations, I can rise those expectations. If you tell me what's required of me, I can do those things. Affirming nonverbal behavior is high with high-achieving students and is often low with low-achieving students. So we have to really be cognizant of that, especially when we're doing wait time. There's a short take video that we aren't going to watch today, but it's a teacher, and as Rashida and I were watching her teach, she uses wait time. I would say she waited with him for about 3 minutes. If you ever time yourself to see how long you give wait time, even 10 seconds can sometimes feel internally painful because you want to keep going. But the message that it sent to that child was not only a nonverbal affirming behavior to a low-achieving student, but also sent the message to everybody else that we persevere and we have patience. And we have to really be cognizant of our facial expression, our body language as we're waiting, because you may be feeling inside, like, oh, I just hope they get it so we can move on. I hope no one else is squirming in their seat. So we have to be stable in that. And the last one, and the reason it's in red, is because it's one of the most important indicators, but adherence to uniform high expectations for all of our kids will result in high student achievement. So if I'm thinking of a question that I'm posing, and in my mind I'm thinking student A can't answer that question, so I'm going to ask student B. I need to figure out a way to use a probing or delving strategy to make sure that student A can answer that question. Because I shouldn't not ask that child and not give the child an opportunity to ask because I know they don't know, because maybe they do. So Rashida is going to go ahead and play a little bit of that clip. And if you go on the MCPS website and just type in short takes, these all come up.
Hello, I'm Donna Gray, Director of the Equity and Resource Unit in the Office of Human Resources and Development. For more than 60 years, educational researchers and scholars have been investigating the effects of teacher expectations on student achievement. The most important finding of this research is that teacher expectations can and do affect student achievement. Either consciously or unconsciously, educators often behave differently towards students based on the beliefs and the assumptions that we have about them. For example, studies have found that teachers engage in affirming nonverbal behaviors such as smiling, leaning forward, and making eye contact with students more frequently when they believe they are interacting with high-ability students than when they believe they are interacting with lower-achieving students. Students who are perceived to be low achievers may be given fewer opportunities to respond in class, to learn new material, and less likely to be given opportunities to improve their answers. Research also indicates that lower achieving students are asked fewer higher order questions, given briefer and less informative feedback, and praised less frequently for success than students who are considered higher ability. A characteristic shared by most highly effective teachers is their adherence to uniformly high expectations for all students.
Okay, so we just wanted to share this because we discovered this. I don't know if has anyone seen this before? I didn't even know this was on our Institute's website, but it's very informative on equitable practices because you hear it, and when I was asked to present with Elise, I felt like one of the students in my classroom, which was interesting because I thought, me, and so when I thought about that and my reaction and my response, those students who try to sit quietly, those students in your class, if I just quietly sit, if I don't move, or if I look away, if I look down, she won't call him or he won't call me, and then if I don't know the answer. So it was interesting that I felt like that student in that moment because I thought, why me? If I just stay quiet enough, and they won't, I won't have to say anything. So anyway, it was just interesting that that I'm presenting this and talking about this. But I did want to share, because it's early in the morning and we forget what we're going to say. So I just want to read this to you. As teachers, we try to pay very close attention in ensuring that our classrooms are equitable, as well as being an effective teacher with equitable practices. However, as teachers, we are also trying to balance many other aspects of teaching that may interfere with ensuring our classrooms continue to remain equitable throughout the year, and that we continue to implement equitable practices for all students. So what I'm really saying is that when we start our year, at the beginning of the year, we work very hard on trying to make sure our classrooms are equitable. We have our desks where they need to be, we have our calling sticks, and this is everyone throughout the school. And we really work hard and we really manage how we're looking, our facial expressions, making sure we look at each student when they walk into our classroom, we know their names, we have their name tags. Mid-year, end of the year, honestly, we're tired. So maybe not so much. So maybe when we're on the carpet and we need to get through our lesson and we know the grades, it's time for grades and grades to do and we have to get to the end of the quarter, we might not practice equitable practices as much. And I think that honestly speaking, we do our best and we really try, but it's just trying to figure out how to practice this throughout the entire year, equitable practices. And so what I found in looking at the short takes, which are very interesting, there are two that stood out to me, and one was, it's number 15, so it acknowledges all students' comments, responses, questions, and contributions.
So if you want to turn to 15 in your packet.
So I'm not sure if we'll put the video on, but what you can do is, based on our time, but what you can do
We'll talk about that later.
Okay. Is you can go on and you can look at these short tapes. They're very informative. They last about 17 minutes, seems like most of them do. You watch the interaction with the teachers and the students. But what I found with this one that stood out to me is that sometimes we do and we don't realize what we're doing until we have to explain what it is that we're doing. And with the students that are in my classroom, I realized that it was very important for me, of all races, of students, it didn't matter low achieving, high achieving, that each student I affirmed and responded to them the same. So it didn't matter if it was my high achieving student, my low achieving student, my reaction was the same to them. It was exciting. I responded the same across the board so that they could see if the answer was incorrect, my response was still the same. So I noticed that in the beginning with the students, if their answer was incorrect, they raised their hand. It was more or less, you tried, you were courageous, you took a chance. It wasn't the correct answer, we're going to find that correct answer, but let's work together to figure that out. But let's praise this person for just raising their hand and for acknowledging them for just taking the chance. When you do that, I noticed that with all students, they become courageous. Even if the answer is not correct, they take the chance. So it's not just these few students who raise their hand and keep answering the questions. It's all students that come together. So that was one that stood out to me. The other one was number 19. I think I have to speed talk.
Oh, you're right.
Which is, uses students' real-life experiences to connect school learning to students' lives. And this was interesting for me because I have a student in my classroom. I wasn't quite sure what her religious background was, but she wears and I don't want to say it incorrectly what she wears, but she's covered, not fully completely, but she has a covering. And so I wasn't quite sure, but I knew from the moment of having that student in my classroom that that was going to change the dynamic in the classroom and how the students looked at, how the other students looked at her. It's not something that we can ignore. You know, obviously she's wearing it every day, she's covered, so it was questions that would come up with the students. And so I took the time in the beginning of the year to acknowledge the difference in our classroom. Not pointing out the one student, but just saying we're all different and just really acknowledging that we come from all over, we have different cultures, really acknowledging different backgrounds. I didn't know her religion, so I didn't want to quite say what, but then I waited until I had a conference with her mother and took the risk and the opportunity to ask her mom, what is your religious background? Do you mind me asking? Can you tell me what she can and cannot do in the classroom? What's allowed? I really want to know, how do you correctly pronounce her name? I think I'm not saying it correctly. I do it 2 different ways, and it bothers me. One day I'm this way, the next day I'm that way. So I got all that information from her mother, because sometimes students don't do that. My son didn't do that. His name stayed different for years, and I said, just make sure you tell him how to say your name correctly. But sometimes students don't do that. But I made sure I got that information from her mom and understood. So now we have a lesson that talks about culture, which was exciting for me, because we talked about culture and understanding that she's Islamic. When we started to talk about religion, and I named off, you know, we celebrate Thanksgiving, Christmas, there are different things that are talked about mostly, you know, and commonly. And then I said Ramadan, and I named off different ones. I'm not sure of all of them, but I named one, and her eyes lit up. And then as if she understands, she understands what I'm also a part of. And then when we started to ask questions in the group, I found that there were 4 students that celebrated the same Islamic holiday, which was wonderful. And so we celebrated, and I said, did you all know you celebrate the same holiday? So it's just pulling the students in, and then they feel more connected. I think they trust you as a teacher, and then they feel trusting to one another. So this is just what I share in my class, and I, say that, I'm sure we all have our own way of showing equitable practices in our classroom, but these 2 stood out for me with the lower grades, with the first grade, to pull everyone together and work together as a team.
And in summary, we wanted to show you a little icon, or a school. Oh, I wanted to say 2 more things. One of the reasons why I spoke to Rashida about doing this presentation is because when I came into her classroom and the students were sitting on the carpet, and maybe it was 3rd or 4th week of school, she called on every single student to answer a question. Now, you don't do that every single time you teach a lesson, right? I mean, we'd be here until midnight. But to start off that way, and every student had the opportunity, and they were not squirming around on the carpet, that's something that's built equitably. And then, in light of what she said about the student with the covering and celebrating religious practices, that's the epitome of cultural proficiency. Because if you ignore it, which is what you were saying, then you're culturally deficient. Because that's when you say, oh, there's a cultural difference, and I'm going to stomp it out, or I'm going to ignore it and pretend like it's not here. So that's really what cultural proficiency is. And equitable practices, in light of that, is this. Equality is when we give everybody the same thing, right? Equity is when we give everybody what they need to achieve. So he needed 2 blocks to be able to see the game. He only needed 1, or none really. So we gave him what he needed. That's equity versus equality. And I think that illustration is very, very powerful. And I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments. I hope you find this resource is very valuable, because I feel like it's like a quick reference sheet that you can use for practicing in the classroom if you're trying to enhance your equitable practices. And the second page on probing and delving is really just, what do you do when students don't respond to you? How do you probe deeper? And the back is, what prompting questions or delving questions can you ask to get them to think deeper in terms of the bullets?
It's always nice when we are able to provide, provide you with opportunities to hear of the great work being done in schools. And I love visiting classrooms. I love to scan and see, wow, look at what we're doing to help reinforce what we require our kids to learn. And I looked at what Rashida's going to allow the kids to do from 12:30 to 1:30 this afternoon. Right about our culture. Then I looked at Lazy Days poster, kitty cat, and then I looked at the Wise Owl. But look at that poster in the corner there. Rashida, if you wouldn't mind reading that for us, I would appreciate it, because it really captures the essence of what we have to do each and every day.
Yes, it's to stand up for what is right, even if we're standing alone.
There you go.